Hello and welcome to the Strong Suit Podcast, where we focus on the people part of your business. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I interview a world-class expert on talent and recruiting so that you can build a company filled with rock stars. But we're not going to focus on recruiting today. We're going to focus on retention and more specifically, how to get the most out of the team you've already worked your ass off to recruit. Because let's be honest, what good is recruiting great people if you don't keep them and engage them and get the most out of them? And I wanted to seek out an expert, someone who's made a science and a career out of this topic. Jason Lauritsen has done exactly that. He's been ahead of HR a number of times, written a number of phenomenal books, and he just came out with his newest one called Unlocking High Performance. And we're going to talk for the next 20 minutes about how to do the same at your company. I don't care if you've got 5 people or 5,000 people. You've got to unlock high performance. So with that, Jason, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I don't even know where to start on this thing because most companies, let's be honest, the data shows that we're at 84% employee disengagement. So we're at record high employment. Almost everyone's working, but almost everyone is miserable. And so they'll take your headhunters calls, and we got to make it so that your company is headhunter proof and you're unlocking their performance. So give us 60 seconds of just kind of a framework of how you think about this, and then we'll drill into it.
Yeah, I think that the key is, I think what we've gotten a lot of this wrong is we've thought about, when we think about how do we retain people? Well, to retain people, the narrative is we need to engage them. Well, how do we engage them? And then there's all these different, things. We do surveys and we do all this other stuff. But I think what's gotten lost in all of that is that the very nature of how we think about work is upside down and due for a reset. And so that's, the book for me was putting together or helping to articulate this reset we need in thinking and how that translates into a different approach to not only, when we think about employee engagement, I don't know, that feels very intangible. I think it's more directly about how do we manage performance? How do we create an experience for our employees every day that feels good for them? Because when it feels good for them, then they're more likely to give us more of their potential, right? I mean, that's what it's about. And so I think it's ultimately about performance. We tend to make it about a lot of other things, but it's about enabling better performance. And so that's what the book is trying to help leaders figure that out.
It may sound simplistic, but let's define performance. In your experience, what is high performance? How do I even know when an employee is delivering high performance versus something short of that?
Well, so there's two things. I mean, performance very simply is, an employee meeting the expectations we put forth for them. I mean, that is...
So they're hitting their numbers, whatever
fundamentally,
that
right? Whatever that is, right?
Okay.
They're doing what we need them to do in order for us as an organization to perform. High performance is about unlocking all of the potential that employee has to give us in the form of performance, in the form of work product, in the form of contributing value towards our objectives as an organization. And so that's really what my work is about, is helping people figure out how to get more of the potential that's available in the people that you already have to put it to work for you.
How do I get my sales reps who are already hitting the number to do 130% of plan by unleashing and unlocking what they can do? So aside from missing the numbers, what other telltale signs are there that I'm not getting high performance from my team or from a particular employee? It's easy in some roles, a sales role, whatever, to look at numbers, but some roles are less easy to understand that.
Well, I think the funny thing is that's a great question, but implied in that question, the reason that's so hard is because we suck at setting clear expectations for people. So, when you're in sales, it's easy. Here's your number, go find it. Or if you're in a call center, make this many calls and convert this many. That's easy. But when you're a financial analyst, what does that look like? Or a programmer?
Non-revenue generating roles are far tougher.
Yeah. And we don't spend the time to develop those competencies, to be good at that, to set expectations. So if you're a leader and you don't know the answer to that question, how do I know when someone's performing or not performing?
Yep.
That's on you. That's because you are not articulating what is expected and what performance means and what good performance looks like at your organization. And so think about that. If you don't know what that is as a leader for your organization, how in the hell are your employees supposed to know?
So I agree with you. You said we suck at that, and I think that's generally true. Why do we suck at that? Is it because it's really hard to do this, or we're too busy, too lazy, or we want to keep our employees guessing in some sick, twisted way?
No, I don't think it is at all an intentional thing. I think it's because it's hard work. It takes time, and it requires that we think about work and we engage, I think, with the people doing the work in an exercise that, that it doesn't go fast, right? When you're trying to think about, well, what does success mean if I'm a financial analyst this year?
Right.
How do we measure? What does output look like? So what would be a good way to measure what success looks like? Let's talk through that and come to some agreements, and then articulate some things that are tangible that we can point towards, and put that in paper. And you can do the same thing on behaviors too. I mean, that's even that much harder.
Yep. But it still has to be done. You still have to lay it out for them.
You can't do it at high speed. As a leader, you have to slow down and do that work. But that, I have a whole chunk in the book dedicated to that. I call it performance planning.
Yep.
If you slow down and do that, it makes everything else work better.
It is a little bit of go slow to go fast.
It is.
So once you've done that and you've gotten clarity, even for these tougher to define non-generating roles,
yep.
How then do I begin to unleash high performance, or to even know what it looks like?
Right. So, well, you should be defining when you're defining the expectations, you're defining what it looks like, because you're talking about, here's what's expected.
Here's the minimum. Like, if you don't do this, you don't keep your job.
Right.
Here's the goal.
Right.
Right. Which is, I expect you to make 100 calls a day. Here's over performance. Here's what it looks like when you are rocking it. It's like 130% to goal.
That's exactly right.
And I find that Rockstars really aspire to that stretch goal. They don't care about your lower goal. They want the top goal.
Well, and I think there's that. So there's that range of specific, tangible, measurable performance, right? The widget that I am expected to create.
Yep.
But I think increasingly the piece that gets left out is that high performance isn't just about what you do, but it's about how you do it, right? Because if I have you come back to we're using sales analogies. So if I have a salesperson who can close 100 deals, which is a really high number for us, 100 deals in this period of time, I have two salespeople, one that does it but is an a-hole, and the other one that does it and also lifts other people up and encourages and brings other people around and shares how they're doing it. It makes my team better. That is what high performance looks like. But that's what high performance looks like because I've articulated that that's what I want, right? That's what our culture is, and that's what I expect of you. And so then you pull people in that direction. So the articulation of that expectation is huge, but then you also have to be in a process of providing them with feedback on how they're doing. It needs to be really easy to understand if I'm, because we often have blind spots. We don't know how we're performing. Right. As much as we suck at setting clear expectations, we suck much worse at providing feedback.
So let's talk about that, because I've been spending a lot of time on this lately with clients, with my students at Kellogg, et cetera. And I'm coming to the conclusion that people don't like giving feedback. I know people don't like getting feedback, but people really shy away from giving feedback. How have you learned to make it relatively painless so that it's actionable, useful, and people will just avoid doing it?
Sure. So for me, the biggest revelation over the last few years as I was searching for, there has to be a way to do this. And the reason we could spend a bunch of time talking about why feedback is so hard, and it's all psychological. There's a bunch of stuff.
We want to be liked. We want to be accepted. No one wants to.
Yeah. It's perceived as a social threat, and our brain perceives social threats in the same way it perceives or processes physical pain. And so it's actually painful to get feedback.
Yep.
And so,
although there are a few people that just are really good at it, so it can be done.
It can be done if you. Well, the key is. So two tips that I would offer. One is, invest in relationship first. If you can build a really healthy, trusting relationship with your team or with your people, then it diffuses how charged feedback is, right?
You're depositing the emotional bank account so that later on you've earned the right to give feedback. You've earned that trust.
Well, I think about it like with my kids. Like I can give my kids feedback about something, or I can tell them that they're doing, that you need to stop doing that or do something else. And they never question that our relationship is in jeopardy, right? So they can take the feedback, change behavior. They don't get all bent out of shape.
Wait, your kids change behavior when you give them feedback?
Once in a while, it does.
You got to
happen.
write a book on that.
They're still pretty young. They're still pretty young.
They're still malleable.
As they get older, that stops, right? That breaks down. But because the relationship is never in question, you can do that. So that's number one as a leader. That takes time. Technique-wise, there's an approach that I actually picked up, or I saw in a couple of places, called feed forward.
What was it?
Feed forward.
Okay.
Instead of feedback, it's called feed forward.
Okay.
The first person I heard talk about it was Marshall Goldsmith, the like guru of executive coaching, and then I heard Marcus Buckingham talk about this a couple of years ago.
Yep.
The essence of this approach is that instead of the problem with feedback is that it's always oriented towards past performance. It's generally oriented towards how your past performance failed in some way or was inadequate. And so that feels threatening, number one. Failure. Number two, I can't do anything to change it. Right? There's nothing I can do to change my past performance. Feed forward is a change in approach that says, instead of being critical of past performance, I'm going to give you suggestions on how you could improve your future performance. It seems very, very subtle, and it's a language. It's really a semantics thing, but
is it splitting hairs?
No, well, it's not, because it's very much about the psychology of the individual receiving it. So, like, for example, let me give you an example. Let's say you and I, you work for me, I'm your sales manager. We go into a client account, you make a sales presentation that morning. After that meeting, there's two different ways I could go. I could say, okay, let's sit down. I want to give you some feedback on that presentation. So I'm going to tell you, when they said this, you said this, that caused them to not engage with you. I'm going to, like I'm telling you all the things that you did wrong, that you should have done differently.
Well, at the very least, I should also give some positive feedback too. But
yeah, it should. But let's, like the whole shit sandwich approach to feedback does not work.
People they're on to us with the shit.
It's still shit in the middle, right? Nobody wants to eat it. Yeah. And so, but what feed forward looks like is there's two things. First, you have to swallow your ego a little bit as a manager, but you say, hey, I have some ideas for how you could improve your next sales, your future sales presentations. Would you like to hear them? So number one,
I'm interested in that because I want to improve assuming I care about improving my numbers. So I'm listening.
And I'm asking your permission, which puts you in a different mindset. So that's number one. Number two, then I'm going to say, okay, when you set up, when you're making this, or, generally, let's say in the past, what I have learned through my own experience is that if I open with a question, that draws in people and they do this. So in the future, what you might want to do, instead of starting with just this deck going into it, you might want to start with a couple of questions. And they're like, wow, that's really good. I hadn't thought about that. The reason that works, and I know that sounds like you're splitting hairs, but they've given me permission. It's about improvement, and they are still in control because I'm not criticizing past performance. I'm giving them ideas for how they could change behavior in the future. They are in control. And so you accomplish the same thing, you deliver the same message. It's just you're oriented towards future performance over the past. I started using this with my team when in my last role, I had a team of people. I started using it. It was amazing. The response, the way it drew people in, it works.
It works. So it's the end of the year, end of the quarter. I've got my third, right? Third of people are crushing it. Third of people I think have potential. They're in the middle. A third are, I don't even know if they're going to make it. Where do I invest my time in? How do I go about trying to unleash potential in the people that aren't crushing it, right? The people that are crushing it, obviously I need to hug them, congratulate them, give them recognition, pay them. But the other 2/3, where do I invest my time wisely?
Sure. So in the book, I have a section that dives into this a little bit, thinking about performance issues or performance challenges. And in essence, there's only a handful of reasons that I think that people don't perform. And so I think the key is diagnosing what's going on. So, do they know what's expected of them, number one? And do they know what's expected? Are they crystal clear on that? If the answer is yes, the next question is, well, do they have what they need? Are they equipped to perform? So is there anything that I'm putting in their way or that's getting in their way of performing that I need to help them with? Or do they not, like maybe they have skills that are missing that we need to fix or whatever, this capability?
Is it a will or skill issue?
Yeah. And then the next is, do they know how they're doing? Right? Are they aware of how, if they know what's expected and they're equipped, do they know how they're doing? Because if they don't know that they're underperforming, then that's not fair. You need to let them know and give them a chance to correct. And then you get into, well, if all of those conditions are true, then they're either one of two things. They're either incapable of performing,
which is a skill issue.
Yeah. So now you've got a talent mismatch, and you can deal with that if it's a person, or you got someone who's choosing not to perform.
A will issue. Now, the skill issue, we can maybe redeploy them if we there's a role or train them. The will issue is much harder. Yeah.
And in that case, I had a mentor that taught me a very simple technique for this. And it's just really once you arrive and you know that that's the case, that's basically presenting the employee with two options and giving them the option. Like option one is, I want you to show me, you need to sketch up for me a plan on how you are going to get on board and catch up. Right. Option two is you're going to show me a plan for how you're exiting the organization. And I'll support you in either one. There is no option three because we can't stay here. And so you have to pick one of those two things. Here's the timeline you have. I need it in the next week.
Right.
And then whatever the option is, I will support you and we will execute that.
It sounds good. It sounds good for senior people. With a junior person who's a junior, meaning less experienced, younger, whatever, who's failing, and you say, show me a plan to turn it around. Is that a realistic expectation?
Well, I mean, let's think about call center, right? If I've been working through those things that I just talked about, then you know what's expected of you. You have everything you need. You've got the training. You know where you're falling short. And so either, you have to come back to me and tell me, because I don't, at this point, I'm at a loss. I've given you everything I can give you. You've got to tell me how you're going to fix this. Because at this point, it's an attitudinal issue. It's a choice. And so I need you to show me how you're going to make different choices to figure this out.
Right.
And if you don't know what that looks like, let's engage in that. I mean, I'll have that conversation all day. Like, hey, I don't know. Like, what do I need to do? I don't want to, I get it. My attitude's been bad. I want to fix it. Okay, fine. I'll lean into that conversation and we'll give you some kind of, runway to fix it with some specific expectations about what needs to happen in order for you to stay here.
Yep.
But if you just say, yeah, I don't know, then
I don't know what to do with that.
That's a choice.
Right.
When you say, I don't know, I do know what to do with it. What I'm going to do is help you find your way to being someone else's problem.
So they really need to take ownership and own the solution.
No question. At that point, they are the only one that can take ownership and fix it because you've done everything you can.
Yeah, it's a will issue. I like the way you've proposed kind of making it a choice for them. How are you going to leave or how are you going to turn this shit around?
Yeah. Well, and you assume, the thing that's built in those, if you notice the first 3 or 4 of those things, like that, all of those things assume that there's something I am not doing as the leader, as the manager. Right? I'm not making it clear. I'm not getting you the tools you need. I'm not giving you feedback or whatever. That's all on me. But once I've fixed all those things and eliminated all those things, the only thing that's left is either you can't do it or won't do it. And those are two things we can deal with.
If you're in this situation trying to unleash high performance, how long do you give people? How long do you stick with them in the hope that maybe they'll find a way to turn it around? I know the answer is 2 people way too long, but
yeah, I wish there was an easy answer. I think it has a lot to do with if you're doing a good job of setting clear expectations and you're doing a good job of in the realm of what I talk about in the book. I call it cultivation of performance, which is, motivation and recognition and all of those kinds of pieces where I'm giving you the best possible I'm setting an environment that makes it optimal for you to perform. So you're clear on what's expected. You have a good environment. You're getting the feedback you need in order to understand where you are and what needs to happen. If I'm doing all of that and I get to this point where you're not performing, I've already checked all those boxes through my system.
Yeah.
So then it's a pretty easy thing. You don't wait at that point. Whatever your performance cycle is, sometimes it's a quarter, sometimes it's a year. It depends. To your point, people often wait far too long. But when the moment arrives, at least this is always my counsel to leaders, when the moment arrives that you have lost confidence that this person can or wants to meet those expectations, at that point is when you set the course, and it doesn't have to be a very long path.
The clock's already ticking by that point.
Right.
Got it. What's been the biggest surprise in this journey for you of putting the book together about unleashing high performance? I'm sure you studied a lot of companies that have been able to do it, haven't been able to do it. What's the biggest myth or just incorrect supposition that leaders have around how to do it?
That's a great question.
I think a lot of them assume the shit sandwich feedback works.
Yeah.
Wrong.
Yeah, from a feedback perspective, I think that one of the big ideas that I start the book with is this: what we've got wrong at a system, at a model level about work is that work was originally constructed when the way we work was originally designed kind of early 1900s, late 1800s, and it was built really around labor union contracts. It's kind of what guided how we set up organizations and management and everything else.
Yep.
And so work was treated as and thought of as a contract with the employee. That's how it actually was.
Yep.
Today, when you look in our workplaces,
until pretty recently, I think, right?
Well, and we still treat it that way. If you look at how we approach management and HR systems, performance appraisals and job descriptions and policy manuals and all of these things are still contractual, transactional devices that exist for us to say, hey, as an employer, we're going to make damn sure we're getting our money's worth out of the employee in this contractual relationship. It's all, it's work as a contract. But what all the data says that we have over the last 20 years about what motivates employees to perform is that employees don't experience work as a contract. They experience work as a relationship. It's all relational. They need to feel valued and trusted and cared for and appreciated and all of these things. And so what I think is counterintuitive for most leaders is that we think that we fall back on the best practice of these contractual approaches.
Right.
And we overlook the critical importance of relationship, and that we need to invest in making that employee feel good about work, feeling like it's a healthy relationship. Because if we do that, that's when they will just voluntarily give us more of their performance and potential and creativity and all that other stuff.
It's no different than a marriage where it is a legal contract that involves the state. But if the relationship is not the focus, then it can be a contract all day long. It doesn't matter.
That's precisely that's a perfect example. And throughout the book, I use a ton of personal relationship examples to illustrate this point, because marriages don't fall apart because the legal contract stops working.
Sure.
They fall apart because it's the relational component that falls apart. That's the same at work.
So what does that look like in these last few minutes? Let's spend it on how do I build that relationship? How do I deposit into the emotional bank account so that I've earned the right to give the feedback and the tough love and all the other stuff later?
Yep. So the number one thing that I advise leaders is you have to recognize that time is the currency of relationships. And this is the inconvenient truth of all of this, is that we're so busy and so obsessed with being busy all the time.
And productivity.
and productivity and efficiency and all this. We've engineered the time for relationship building and formation out of our workflow. We've got to put that back in. So things like manager-employee one-on-ones are absolutely critical. At least once a month, an employee should have a one-on-one touch point with their manager, if not more often than that, depending on the nature of the work.
And so if you can't do it, then you've got too many direct reports.
Yeah, or you're just not prioritizing things correctly.
Right.
Because if you'd spend more time with your people, then your people would perform better, and you wouldn't need to be chasing things around as much. And so you're putting your time in the wrong place. And so making time because that fuels things, really critical things to the relationship, like communication. You have to really work to remove as much uncertainty for the employee as you can. Uncertainty about their relationship with you, uncertainty about what's expected of them, uncertainty about how they're doing, all of that. And that only happens through conversation that happens regularly.
Yes.
And so communication.
Can't be pigeon management where I swoop in once a quarter, shit on you, and then leave. It's not going to work.
Not going to work. Yeah, I mean, that's no relationship, right? There's no relationship there. If you're going to have a relationship, you have to see each other and spend time together fairly regularly.
Right.
So spend time, make time. Communication is critical. You've got to be in a conversation. So when you're doing your one-on-ones or you're having any interaction with an employee, if you're talking more than half of the time, you're losing. Like, you need to be asking questions and listening a majority of the time if you want to build relationships.
And sometimes just letting them vent.
Yes. Same as in your marriage.
People to talk.
Yeah. Any relationship. If you spend your whole time, if you have a friend that you get together with for coffee or beers, they show up and they just talk at you the entire time and then leave, you're not going to go back and do that very often.
Yeah.
Same thing is true with management.
Yeah.
The other big thing I think is appreciation. There's a lot of people that show up every day, and we management got sucked into this trap of thinking that this is a traditional management mindset, but that we should only recognize and reward our high performers because we want to create this pull incentive. We want everybody to be a high performer. The problem is you have a whole bunch of people that show up every day in their job and they work their butts off, and they give you your best, or they give you their best, and they meet expectations. And that's all the better they're ever going to do. Yeah. And then they go home, and it feels like nobody even cared or noticed that they were there.
Right. You withheld that affection just like you might withhold it from a child, which is really painful.
Yeah. And they want to just be seen. Like most children just want to be like, see me, see me, see me, validate that I matter.
Making a difference. Yeah.
So saying little things, like saying thank you, or, hey, I really appreciate this. Or, again, making time to have a one-on-one sends a pretty powerful message that you matter to me, that I care, that I'm willing to make time and invest it in you. So those are the things that I would say that are really small. They seem small and insignificant, but you need to be regularly saying thank you and expressing appreciation. You need to be in constant communication, two-way conversational communication. And if you're not having one-on-ones, then you're not doing it right. You need to be having those one-on-ones.
And I'll go one step further. If you, as the leader, and I don't care if you're a CEO, a founder, a head of a department, if you don't love doing this stuff, or at least want to do this stuff, you're in the wrong job. And there's no shame in that. You should be an individual contributor, make yourself chairman, chief innovation officer. Don't worry about the title, but a leader who loves doing this stuff, that's what builds organizations and drives retention of your best people.
I just talked to a CEO last week that said this. She's always like prided herself on trying to be a really good manager. She had a couple people leave her the previous week, and she's like, it turns out I just am not a good manager. I shouldn't be doing this. And so she said, I'm going to get out of the way and promote, someone to run the people side of the business, because otherwise we're not gonna make it. I'm the obstacle.
I give her a lot of credit for having the self-awareness to do that.
Absolutely.
So you need to get a copy of this book, Unlocking High Performance by Jason Lauritsen, how to use performance management to engage, empower your employees to reach their full potential. If your business is not about this, I don't know I just think you're wasting your time. I don't care how good a product you've got, how great your marketing campaign is, how much money you've raised. If you don't get the most out of your top performers, which, by the way, will encourage them to stay, which is the only thing you can do in the face of this kind of unemployment rate, record low unemployment. Jason, how can people get their hands on the book, get in touch with you?
The book should be anywhere online you buy books. Amazon, any place else you want to
Is there
find
any
it.
place else online to buy books other than Amazon?
Well, anymore, I guess there's maybe one or two, and I'm sure Amazon is probably in the process of buying them or shutting them down.
Right.
So go to Amazon, type in Unlocking High Performance, you'll find it.
Great.
As far as finding me, my website's jasonlauritsen.com. That's the best place to find me, and jason@jasonlauritsen.com is my email. Feel free to reach out.
You are one of the clearest thinkers about this topic, and I really appreciate your sharing your wisdom with us, because this is what I would say is simple but not easy. And Absolutely. It's a lifelong discipline of getting better at this stuff, but it makes all the difference. So thank you, and congratulations on the new book.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.